You're listening to The Head Trash Show with the founder of Head Trash, Alexia Leachman. Head Trash is the home to the new and unique Head Trash clearance method that removes unwanted negative thoughts, feelings and emotions quickly and effectively so that you can achieve clarity, confidence and contentment in your life. Tune in every week as Alexia shares insights and simple strategies to help you create some headspace to experience confidence and clarity in your life and business. To find out how to clear your head trash quickly and effectively using our unique method, pop over to www.headtrash.co.uk to get our free download and subscribe for our free head trash clearance updates. And now for the show.
Hello and welcome back to the Head Trash Show. This is me, your host, Alexia Leachman. Thank you so much for joining me. Now, today I've got a real treat. Now, maybe I say that every week, but today really is a real treat. Today's episode is all about sleep and how to prevent things like insomnia, which I know is something that a lot of you are writing to me about, saying, hey, I really can't sleep. My mind is whirring. Can you help? Any advice? Now, I'm not a sleep expert. You know, I specialise in the head trashy side of it, all the bad thoughts and stuff. So I wanted to find out from an expert who works with people with sleep problems all the time, what we can do to resolve the insomnia problem and get better sleep. So in a moment, I'm going to be speaking to a brilliant expert called Chel Hamilton. Now, I'm warning you now, Chel is an amazing lady. She is a hypnotist by trade, has been doing hypnosis for over 10 years, and her voice is incredibly hypnotic. So you might get sucked into some kind of hypnosis or whatever. She's got a beautiful voice, so beware. And I've also got to make a few apologies. We did have a couple of coughs during the episode, but I didn't want to take them out because when I did, it just broke the flow. So there's a couple of coughs in there, and also there's a couple of swear words, I'm afraid, so I have to apologise in advance. But again, I didn't want to take those out because that is the essence of the conversation, and I think it's always best to have a natural, free-flowing conversation if possible. So yes, in the sleep conversation coming up, there are some really, really great resources that Chel is going to share with us, and I've managed to get her to send me all the links because there's some really juicy bits that she's going to share, so look out for some of the stuff coming up. And also, while we're on the topic of sleep, for me, sleep is quite a big topic, and there's lots of reasons and why we might not be having good sleep. And there's certainly a lot of approaches that we can take to help us resolve the issues that we're having. And certainly some of the stuff that Chel's going to be sharing with us today is her approach and how she helps people. But I have got some other experts coming up as well that I'm talking to about other things that we can do about sleep. And the other thing I want to say as well is I'm developing a product about helping you to get sleep. So really focusing on the negative thoughts, feelings and emotions and dealing with the emotional side of the sleep problem. So keep tuned for updates on that. I'm going to be working on it very, very soon. So I'll be letting you know where I'm at with that and when it goes live really, really soon. But back to today's show, and yes, I'm going to hand over now to the time that I spoke to Chel Hamilton, who is a hypnotist who specialises in helping people with sleep problems, and you are going to love this interview chat. She is wonderful. Welcome to the show, Chel. Thank you so much for coming on the Head Trash Show.
Thank you so much for having me. It is my pleasure.
Now, before we dive in to chat about insomnia, can you just tell my listeners a little bit more about you and how you come to do what you do today?
Yeah. Well, I do a couple of things. I do have a meditation podcast on iTunes, but I make my living as a hypnotherapist, and I see clients. I have a brick and mortar practice in Columbus, Ohio, that this year I'm actually closing up my brick and mortar shop and working completely online via Skype and phone, which is something I've been doing for a couple of years now, and I have actually found that working with my hypnotherapy clients online and on the phone is more effective than seeing them face to face. And I'm not quite sure why that is. It may have to do with lack of distractions and focus. But yeah, I make my living mostly just doing hypnotherapy. I've been doing that full time since 2007.
Wow, that is a long time. Well done.
It's been great.
And if anybody, excuse me, I did listen to your podcast on iTunes yesterday as I was preparing for today, and I had to stop because your voice is just too good and I nearly fell asleep at my desk. So warning to anybody else, you might fall asleep during this podcast. I'm going to try and keep it lively just in case we get tempted to get hypnotic in our language. But yeah, do head over to it's Mini Meditations. Is that what it's called?
Meditation minis,
yeah, to the podcast. Really, really great. They're nice and short, aren't they? Under 10 minutes.
Yes, and please don't listen to them while driving.
No, disclaimer alert.
I had a client do that once. He's like, I was all like stressed out, and so I thought I would just like listen while I was driving because I was so stressed out. There was no way that I was going to fall asleep. And he's like, I almost ran off the road. I'm like, yeah, because you're an idiot.
Oh dear.
So yeah, don't do that.
No, we'll try not to. So insomnia. Now you mentioned when for those that sort of have a wander around your website, one of the things you mention is that you specialise in helping people with insomnia. So this is going to be really, really useful because I've got a lot of my listeners have written to me going, I can't get to sleep. Help me get to sleep. And so, this is really what people want to know. So before we sort of get into maybe some of the more tips or strategies or things like that, what do you think is behind the problem that is insomnia? What do you think lies behind that?
Oh, that is a loaded question. It really depends upon the person, doesn't it? So in my experience, there are, we can talk about like the scientific names of everything, but who cares? Let's just talk in normal language. There are really three main kinds of insomnia. There's the difficulty falling asleep insomnia. Mm-hmm. There is the I keep waking up in the middle of the night insomnia. And then there is the night terror insomnia. And that one's a little more rare. It's usually based in some kind of trauma that somebody experienced as a kid. Right. So with the falling asleep variety, that tends to be, the thoughts spinning in our head. Some of it may be some biochemistry happening, which we can talk about in the tips and tricks section. Keeping, the notebook next to your bed so that you can write those thoughts down so that you don't have to sit there and try to remember to not forget to remember to do that thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that safe place. Can't help it. It's just part of the whole thing. Yes, you were all just hypnotized going, what in the world was she just saying? So that falling asleep variety, that is one that I actually suffer from, both the falling asleep variety and the staying asleep variety. The falling asleep, that has a tendency to be, like I said, the crazy mind kind of chatter talk. It can also be this thought that we have that, oh my God, another night, this is going to be so horrible, I'm never going to fall asleep, and just kind of moving back and forth. Some of it can be physical. We can have some physical discomforts that make it difficult. The staying asleep variety, besides the getting up and having to use the bathroom, normal reasons to have to get up, sometimes that is caused by the subconscious mind being hyper vigilant about the noises that it's hearing or not hearing. We've all had the experience of, hopefully we've all had the experience at some point of traveling someplace and you're in a hotel room or in somebody's house and the noises are different, or you've moved homes and that little creak and that little squeak, and you wake up and you wake up and you wake up and you go, what's that? What's that? What's that? For some of us, that happens even when we're in our normal beds for years, that hypervigilance. Usually the process is, that's a safe noise. And so then the next time your subconscious mind hears that noise, it lets you sleep through it. For those of us who have the hypervigilance issue, that's not the case. It continues to wake us up. Mm-hmm. Part of that's a safety security thing too, right? Because that's its number one job. Our subconscious mind's number one job is to keep us safe. Mm-hmm. And that leads into the night terrors, that somebody who has night terrors, typically from trauma, it's like hypervigilant subconscious mind on steroids. And the littlest thing, it's like, shit, not safe, have to fight or flight, run, beat something up, get out of here. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And the night terrors, do you see a distinction between the night terrors that kids might experience and those that we might get as adults? I mean, are they a different kind of, is there something different going on there?
That's a really great question, and I do work with kids 8 and up, so I've seen some of this. Typically, night terrors in adults are in my experience at least, I'm not saying this is, every case in every situation, but typically night terrors are due to some kind of trauma experienced as a child. Right. Whereas the child trauma, we traumatize ourselves as children all the time, and one of the reasons why is because we're pretty much constantly in a state of trance, which makes us super suggestible to the little shadow in the closet scaring us. There's another piece of the night terrors, though, that people get confused about, that this is probably a good time to bring it up. Sometimes what we experience as a night terror is actually a blood sugar drop in the middle of the night, and that may be because of what we're eating or not eating before we go to bed. Alcohol, people who drink, whether they do it regularly or for some people even when they do it just once in a while, their sleep sucks after they drink. They might pass out, but then they're waking up because of that blood sugar drop and because of some of the other physiology changes that happen as the body's trying to process that alcohol.
When someone's going through a night terror, what do they just kind of wake up in a real, suddenly in bed and breathing fast? Is that typically what's going on, or is that different to people getting up and maybe walking in their sleep and doing crazy stuff while they're still sleeping? I mean, is that a different category again?
Typically, night terrors are more of the fear-based stuff, but on an experiential level, does it matter if you're getting up, walking around, or if you're waking up terrified? It's still going to interrupt your sleep just as much. Yeah. And both of them are a subconscious mind solution. Everything that we're talking about here, your subconscious mind is doing what it's doing because it thinks that's what it has to do in order to keep you safe. Even though that sounds totally messed up in our experience of it, that's our subconscious mind. Its number one job is to keep us safe. And when it's creating these negative issues, it actually thinks that it's doing us good.
So what kind of things can be leading our mind to think that? What kind of things might we be doing with our lives in the day that could... The body's getting confused and doing this to us? What typically, what kind of things might that be?
Well, on a mental level, I would say and this could actually be a little confused with night terrors, even though it's not, so it's probably a good point to bring up. I see a lot of clients who, that last half hour to hour before they go to bed, they're watching the news, and I don't know what the news is like in the UK, but in the States, it's fear, 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 oh, yeah. Go buy something, fear, 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 go buy something. Yeah. It's horrible. If you're doing that to yourself or watching whodunits or cop shows, anything that's making that safety security issue come up, the things that we do that last hour to half hour before we go to bed, we're actually starting to get into a natural trance state in that time frame. And so our subconscious mind starts to think, oh, well, we need to solve that problem in our sleep. We need to figure that out while we're sleeping. And if the things that you're wanting to figure out are all fear, 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 then of course it's going to be hypervigilant.
Okay. And also, I guess, if we're starting to that hypnotic, we're getting to that trance, we're quite suggestible at that point as well. So anything that's fear-based is really going to be going straight down deep into our subconscious quite quickly, isn't it?
Abso-frickin-lutely.
Yeah, so the news is bad, but we knew that anyway.
Well, even reading your favorite whodunit, that can start to trigger that as well. If you are... Let's say that you're doing some work that requires you to do some problem solving. You might decide to give up a good night's sleep to think about that stuff just before you go to bed. But if you do that every night, it's going to become problematic. That last half hour to hour before we go to sleep, some cues that are really helpful, and some of these are actually based in science. And once the sun starts to set, we should no longer have overhead lights because that fakes our body out into thinking that it's still light out. All the lights should become cozy. On an environmental level, I love the compact fluorescents, but on a sleep level, they totally suck because they tend to be that blue light, and we don't want blue light. We want that warm, cozy light, and as little of it as possible. So to cave down is what I call it. To cave down in the evenings, even before you go to sleep, can be super helpful.
Are you talking about maybe just those lights that literally near the ceiling, just switch all those ones off and just move to little bedside lights and table lights on a practical level? Is that what you mean?
exactly what I mean.
Right. I've never heard that before. That's brilliant. Thank you.
Really?
No,
oh my
I haven't.
goodness. There's some
simple and obvious. Now you mention it.
I'll send you a link to a book that talks about some studies for that. Yes, you've got a cave down. Just think of a cave. A cave is cozy. It's amber lights. It's as little light as possible. You know, they have these studies showing the blue light on the computer screens and the iPads and such are interrupting sleep as well. So making sure that you have an amber or blue light filter that makes that light amber light in the evening is super helpful as well, or to use one of the readers that doesn't have the backlighting.
I've got this thing on my desktop actually that called Flux that changes the light that comes off my screen so I can do late night working.
Yes,
but
I have the same thing.
Yeah, so it's really weird though when I come in after having put the little one to bed and my screen just looks orange kind of thing, and it takes a while to adjust, but you know, it means I can get some work done when she's asleep, which is good for mums.
Yes. Yeah, I use the same thing. I have a blue light filter on my phone as well. So those are things I highly recommend.
Oh, how do you get that on your phone then? Is that like something, a screen that you put over the top of the screen, or is that an app?
No, it's an app.
Oh, would you mind sharing the app with us?
I will. Well, I'm on a Samsung. I switched from iPhone to Samsung this year. I may be switching back. The name of the app on the Android is called Blue Light Filter. Blue
light filter, okay, right. I'll put notes for that in the show notes on the podcast later if you want to grab that later. Okay, so caving down is a really good technique to help you to prepare for sleep. Anything else that can help you in that 1 hour, that critical 1 hour before bed then?
Really making sure that anything that you're doing, any information that you're putting into your head is mellow and makes you feel good and safe. This would be a really great time to take a hot bath. It would be a great time to have an evening ritual of a cup of chamomile tea. If you love to read, to get into bed, but to read something that is not going to get your heart racing and not going to get your mind into fight or flight. Maybe reading some spiritual stuff that you like. Revisiting a book that you like, but again, you know, I love sci-fi. That's my private pleasure. That, you know, it's embarrassing, but I love sci-fi.
So you read a bit of sci-fi?
No, I can't because that'll just keep me up all night.
Yeah.
So don't read those things that are page turners for you, whatever you do.
I know, and that's the stuff I like reading. It's terrible. There's loads of books that I want to read that are by my bed that I know if I start reading them, I'm going to be all excited, mind going, ideas flowing, you know, adrenaline pumping. I'm like, when am I going to read this stuff? You know, if I don't read it now, it's so frustrating.
At lunch. You can read it at lunch.
Yeah. So the calming words, and obviously no TV.
I would be gun shy of the TV. I have been known from time to time to watch me a little Hulu at night in bed, which is not the best thing to do. But I do have my flux filter on as I do that. So, you know, we have to work within reality. We can't just go, I'm going to change everything. Start where you are and begin to move in that general direction.
Okay. So when somebody's actually, lying on the pillow, lights out, they've decided they're going to sleep. This is it now. They're tired. They want to sleep, and it's half an hour's gone by, and they still haven't gone to sleep. What advice have you got for them if they're going through that?
The first thing I would say is that laying in bed for a half hour is actually quite normal for many people who are normal sleepers. So I wouldn't judge that at all. There are some supplements that you can try, like tryptophan and 5-HTP. I know a lot of people are familiar with like melatonin and stuff. Personally, I found that tryptophan works better for me. So that is a possibility to help. But laying there for a half hour, not fighting it, really is the big thing. And isn't that what we always do? When it comes to things like insomnia and anxiety, we fight it. We judge it and say, this is terrible. I've been awake for 20 minutes. What's wrong with me? That just feeds it and makes it worse. So to relax into it, to make yourself as comfortable as possible, one thing that I do is I tell myself, you know, it's going to be what it's going to be. It's all good. It's going to be what it's going to be. And by not fighting it, you're able to relax and get to sleep 9 times out of 10. There are other things you can do. Certainly I would, you know, if you have been having this issue for a long time, I would actually look into some hypnotherapy sessions with somebody and see if that doesn't help. I know I've had clients that I had this young lady just a couple of months ago. She has been on sleep meds, prescribed medication for over 7 years. And she came to me for a hypnotherapy session. Now, she is one of those people who is extra suggestible, so she would probably end up in a stage show if she weren't careful. There's kind of this scale that people fall into naturally. And most people are hypnotizable. We're hypnotized all day long by media and everything else. But some people are super hypnotizable. And she was one of those. She went home that night. She quit her sleep meds, which I never would have recommended to anybody after being on them for 7 years to go cold turkey. But she didn't ask my opinion. She just did it. And she never had a problem again with sleep. She came back for 2 more sessions to just kind of make sure everything was reinforced. But she never again had a problem.
So really it is something that for those that sort of really struggle with it and think, goodness, I've had this for ages, what am I going to do? Then there really is, it is completely solvable as far as you're concerned without taking meds and just, seeing somebody like a hypnotherapist.
I think that it's a multi-approach. If you have been struggling with this for years and you are not willing to turn off the overhead lights, especially if they're like fluorescent or those daylight bright lights, if you're not willing to make some of those kinds of simple changes, then you're probably never going to overcome this. But if you're willing to experiment maybe with some supplements, maybe with some chamomile tea, a little bit of hypnotherapy, turning lights off, not watching the TV at night, then yeah, I think that you're going to be able to take your insomnia and at least knock it down to 70% of the time or more sleeping great. That's not to say that sometimes we don't have issues. I sometimes have issues. Last night, I had some issues. I kept waking up because I had blood sugar drops. Why? Because I ate wrong before I went to bed, and it caused a whole slew of problems. But I didn't fight it. I just said, oh, okay, you did this to yourself. Okay, let's just keep moving forward.
I think that's a really important point. That not, you mentioned earlier, not judging the fact that you've been here for 20 minutes and still not asleep. And that's a really, really, I think, important point. When the minute I accepted that, I changed my language, the language that's going on in my head when I wasn't falling asleep. And rather than sort of going through that, oh my God, I'm not going to have my 8 hours. I'm not going to have I need 8 hours. Don't you know? If I don't have 8 hours, then I'm going to be in a right state tomorrow. I'm going to be so tired. And lying there going, I'm going to be so tired and repeating this really negative language to myself. And instead I decided that, hey, I only needed 5. 5's all I need. I'm going to be fresh. I'm going to be so fresh tomorrow. In fact, I'm going to be so alert tomorrow thinking, yeah, right. And I was, it's amazing how you can kind of suggest to yourself that things are just going to be fine. And actually, we're just probably making it worse by telling ourselves that it's not going to be fine if we don't get this magic number of hours that we think we need, And that's
I promise you're making it worse. There's no doubt in my experience working with people. I used to have panic attacks. Like I always tease my clients, the reason why I can help you is because I used to be crazier than you and I'm just not that girl anymore.
I've been there, yes.
So yes, all of that negative thinking, all of that fighting it, the always and the nevers and just stop and breathe and let it go.
Absolutely. Now you've got a great book that you have called Rewire It, isn't it? It's from your website. Is that what it's called?
Yes, it's a little ebook on how to overcome some of these negative thought patterns.
And one of the things that you share in that, would you mind sharing that first technique in there? Because I think it's brilliant, so simple. I'll just hand over to you to just explain it, because I think would that be a good time to use this technique when you're wrestling with these thoughts before going to sleep?
Actually, all three, Rewired is a 3-step process that's really simple and highly effective. And yes, I would say that this is a perfect situation to use this in. The first thing that you do is you don't fight it. You just cancel. And I've had clients say that out loud in grocery stores. I don't recommend that unless you're alone, because people thought they were crazy. You can say it inside your head. And it's not words like stop or, forget it. It's just cancel, like a computer program.
So you just say those words. The minute the thought comes in your head, you just say in your head, cancel.
Mm-hmm. Now, step 2 is important, though.
Okay.
I know you said just step 1, but step 2 is really
Okay.
important, because then you have to rewire your brain to move towards those more positive thoughts. And this is what you were already talking about that you have done yourself. So you moved from, oh my gosh, I have to have my 8 hours, I'm going to be miserable if I don't have it, to cancel, cancel, cancel. I'll be fine with 5. It's all good. I'll take care of it. I've dealt with tougher stuff than this before. You've got to move over to that positive language, a positive language that is true, not positive language that is fluffy bullshit.
Yeah.
And there's some examples of it in the book. I'm happy to share that link with your podcast listeners as well.
Oh, thank you so much. It's a really quick read. How to read, it's brilliant. Some really great ideas there. And I think for simplicity, it's brilliant. Really easy to remember as well, which I think makes it, if you can integrate some stuff like that into our lives every day, then that means it can really have big impact. So thank you for offering to share that with the listeners. I would highly recommend having a read. So the first step, let's just go over it, is say cancel, cancel, cancel. The second step is start putting some positive alternative, like the alternative positive version that you want to happen. And so what's step 3?
Step 3 is for when step 2 doesn't work. Sometimes if we're thinking of the past, step 2 won't work. Or sometimes if we're in a situation where we're already really emotionally triggered by whatever those thoughts were that we canceled, then it can be very difficult to get to those positive pictures. And so then what you do is you skip step 2 and you go to step 3, which is you just run a monologue of what's happening in the reality of the present moment. I'm filing this piece of paper, I'm making this phone call, whatever that is, and drown out that fear stuff that's coming up, and certainly not add to it or amp it up.
Yeah, so when you're saying what you're doing, you're just reporting facts. You're not adding emotional content to it. Like, I'm filing this piece of paper for the 10th time and I hate filing the paper. You're not kind of adding to it. You're just simply reporting the facts.
That is a really good point. I may have to add that to the book very specifically, because I don't think I put it quite in that language. But yes, you're absolutely right. We don't want to add story to the factual information.
Okay. So basically, you have a negative thought, you have something that's not helping you, so you just, in your head, say cancel, cancel, cancel. If you can, then you say something positive as an alternative. If you can't, then you just basically narrate your life minus the emotional content.
Exactly. You're brilliant. Can I use that as a little summary at the end of the book? I'll rewrite it, add that in.
Go right ahead. So that is such a simple approach to trying to sort of sort out that stuff in our heads. How many times are people going to have to say cancel?
At first it feels like all the fucking time.
Yeah.
It really, really, really does. But let me tell you, I've used this in my own life, like with all kinds of stuff. And I used to see sharks in swimming pools. That's how powerful my imagination was. Terrified of sharks. And it was because when I was 13, my dad took us to see Jaws when we were on vacation at the beach, at the East Coast, on the United States shore. And he thought Jaws was a really good idea. I did not go in the water for 2 years after that. So being traumatized with that imagery at a young age, anytime I would get in a swimming pool and open my eyes underwater, I would see da-da-da-da-da-da, and I would know that there's no shark in the swimming pool because nobody would be stupid enough, but my body didn't know. My body had to explode and get the F out of the water, even though I'm laughing because I know how ridiculous this is. And then I still want to go check at the end of the deep end, once I'm out of the water to make sure there's no sharks. Crazy, absolutely insane, knowing that this is completely insane. So that was up until I was about 28 years old. Okay. And then I started doing more work on, my anxiety. I'd had panic attacks and things like that, and I really needed it, all of it without any drugs, just with mental mind training. And this past year, I went snorkeling in waters that could have sharks. Now, I didn't go someplace specifically that I knew would be shark-filled. It did take me the third third time I kind of stepped up. So I took my son, we went snorkeling in an enclosed lagoon, but it was a really big lagoon. And I had never snorkeled before, so I had the whole like weirdness with the mask, and the whole time I would see things out of the corner of my eye, even though I knew there couldn't possibly be sharks there. Cancel. There can't possibly be sharks here. You're in an enclosed lagoon. They would never let that happen. It's all good. If you feel like you're drowning, just lift your head. Okay, keep moving forward. So then, and this is me, using this process for years, but I had to really double down on it because I was facing a very real and old fear. 2 days later, we went and snorkeled with wild sea turtles, and sharks could have totally been there, but there were like guys in little boats kind of out where the edges were, and I kept telling myself, okay, those guys are going to make sure that we're all safe, and if they see something, they're going to let us know, and it's all cancel, it's all good. And then 2 days later, I went in open water where there totally could have been sharks the whole time, and I was fine. I'm ready to go like get in a shark cage now and be with crazy great whites being chummed up just to like face the end of that fear.
Wow.
I used the whole process.
Brilliant. So that was days pretty much, wasn't it?
Yes.
On your vacation. I've just said vacation for the UK people here. Holiday. I can't believe I just fell into that. You're hypnotising me to speak American.
It's okay. We'll just go back and forth across the pond.
Now, you know what? I think Jaws has got a lot to answer for because my brother had that same fear. He couldn't go swimming in the sea. He couldn't go underwater. I think a lot of, parents have traumatised their children around sharks by getting them to watch Jaws. It's amazing how a film like that when we're so young can have such an impact on our lives as an adult, isn't it?
Well, yes, and that brings up two things. So when we watch movies, we are hypnotized, right? We go into a trance. The only reason why we cry at the movies is because we're feeling something, because we're entranced by what's happening. And then fear puts us into trance as well. So you get this big screen, you get people scared, now you're doubly tranced down. That can implant all kinds of stuff.
And I guess I'm just thinking now, as a mum, since I've become a mum, I cry even more at films, even things that aren't sad. Does that mean I'm being more hypnotised by what I'm seeing as a mother, or is that another set of weird stuff going on altogether?
It's probably another set of weird stuff altogether.
I know I've tried adverts since being a mum. It's ridiculous. Anyway.
Yes, I've done that as well. Where you're like, it's the Hallmark commercial.
Oh, terrible. So we were talking about the first type of those people that can't get to sleep. Mm-hmm. What about the guys that wake up in the middle of the night then that have got, suddenly they wake up and they can't get back to sleep? Is that a different set of, is there a different solution for these guys to the first lot that can't fall asleep in the first place?
Yes and no. So for the people who wake up in the middle of the night, one thing, a couple of things to look at. You need to look at the blood sugar connection. You need to look at if you're drinking alcohol or not. And then once you're kind of looking at those two things, also, is there light in the room? Our bodies, interestingly enough, like your skin, even if you have a mask on, like a sleep mask, our skin knows when there's light in the room. Even the smallest amount of light, it can pick up the light photons.
Wow. Really?
Mm-hmm. Yes. So making sure that you've got like blackout blinds, everything is dark and cozy. Again, caving down. Think of how we evolved. We evolved in the dark at night. We went to sleep and we caved down, and if we had any light, it was a fire. But that eventually went out too. Making sure that your environment is as dark and quiet as possible, even if it means having like a fan or a sound machine there for you. I have tried using some of the sound apps, and I personally notice when they loop even when I'm sleeping, which sounds strange, but I'm super sensitive. I prefer like a little air machine if that's a problem. If you have kids, the greatest thing my mom ever did for me and the greatest thing I ever did for my kids is this. When you have little kids, do not make the house totally silent when they're napping. Please, 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 please do not do that. Vacuum, put on music, make them learn from a very young age to sleep through sound, because if everything is totally quiet and nobody can make a sound, then they're going to have problems growing up because they're going to need that. Anything less than that is going to make them feel unsafe. My mom used to literally vacuum in my room under my crib when I was sleeping. And it really helped until I was an adult and I started developing other sleep problems. Like as a kid, I was a great sleeper, but then the anxiety, mine really came on because of the anxiety and the safety and security issues. The second part of that, so besides the noticing the physical stuff that you can address if you're the kind of person who wakes up, and the blood sugar is really, really huge. I would say not eating any kind of grainy-based carbs before you go to sleep, and definitely if you're going to have some food, have protein and healthy fats because they process much slower and the blood sugar spike and drop is going to be eliminated. But if you're having things like pasta or ice cream within an hour or two of going to bed, that's really not a good idea at all. And if you haven't eaten for 4 hours and you go to bed and then you're waking up 3 hours later, that's probably a blood sugar drop too. Having a little snack, maybe some tuna or something before you go to bed, if that's the case, may really, really help with that. The other piece, though, is just like the first people. When you do wake up, don't fight it. It is what it is. The more that you just kind of go, okay, you know what, I'll deal with it. It's all right. Just make myself comfortable. Take a couple of deep breaths. There's some training that you can do, a progressive muscle relaxation. A lot of people do a progressive muscle relaxation where they tense and release their body. I do not recommend that. I recommend just inviting kind of a comforting, relaxing feeling to move through your body, and maybe even imagining what it would be like if you were in a hammock, just swaying back and forth, or melting into the bed, or drifting away on a cloud. Whatever kind of sensory imagery feels really good for you, I would do that as well. So it definitely helps when I do it.
Nice, relaxing. And a friend of mine who's a hypnotist suggested saying things like drifting, dropping, deep, that, these kind of words that denote downward, kind of sinking deep into sleep, that kind of stuff. Does that kind of sound helpful stuff to do as well?
Yes, it does. I would add the imagery and the feeling of it to the words, because your subconscious mind doesn't actually understand words. Your subconscious mind's language is pictures, feelings, and tone of voice, but not the words. That's why when you tell yourself all day long, don't eat the chocolate chip cookie, don't eat the chocolate chip cookie, don't eat the chocolate chip cookie, you go home and eat the chocolate chip cookie, because your subconscious mind all day long saw cookie, 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 cookie.
Yeah. It doesn't hear do not, does it?
It does not hear words. It only hears pictures, tone of voice, and feelings. I'm glad you brought up the thing about your friend who's the hypnotist. One other thing that a lot of people do is they search for these insomnia guided meditations on YouTube and things like that. And in a pinch, that's okay. But if you are listening to things like that every night, then you become reliant on it and it will stop working. It would be better to listen to something like that during the day, and then you yourself practice recalling those feelings, practice recalling those images all on your own. Thereby you become resourceful in yourself, and your subconscious mind learns how to solve that problem on its own.
I think the art of, you almost need to learn how to fall asleep on your own, don't you? Rather than using
absolutely.
Crutches. Yeah. Because I think,
and you can use the crutch during the day, but then practice it at night, so that you can read a book all day long on how to ride a bike until you actually ride the bike. You don't know shit about riding a bike.
Yeah. So it's just tapping into all that stuff that you've learned and just putting it into practice and doing it for yourself.
Exactly.
So we had the technique, which is the cancel technique, and then there's a caving down technique. I love that caving down technique, and I'm going to start using that a lot more. In my environment, I can't believe that I've left some of the overhead lights on, even like in the kitchen when I go and prepare my hot chocolate, for example. I'm not sure if I'm allowed a hot chocolate late at night, but not to use the overhead lights in the kitchen. Just put a different light on in the kitchen. It's going to make a difference, isn't it?
Yeah, and the nice thing is it becomes like this cozy, romantic, intimate. I mean, it just makes the evening so much nicer.
Yeah, absolutely.
We might even get to have more sex because everybody's feeling so cozy and intimate.
I know. I was speaking to another sleep expert, and she suggested that you need to fill the last hour of your day with something that you can do in the dark.
Oh, nice.
So, but she didn't mention sex at that point, which I thought was a natural, the obvious choice if you want to try and, get tired and go to sleep. But,
exactly.
So let's not forget some other things we can do that doesn't involve looking at a screen, because I think the screens are really damaging, aren't they? And they really, that UV light has got a lot to answer for. And not a lot of, I know like the Kindle, you can put it on the black screen, can't you? Have white text out of black. And that certainly does help. But does that is there still a little bit of UV light coming through when you put the screen that way around?
Probably. I think if you really love to read and you're not reading paper books, it may be worth investing in the Amazon Paperwhite that has no backlighting whatsoever?
Oh, okay. That's a good tip.
Yeah, because the latest research has proven that the iPads and such, they definitely interrupt sleep. They make it, even the people who are falling asleep, they're feeling less rested in the morning. I'll send you a link. There's a recent study to that. Even though they're falling asleep, they are feeling less rested in the morning.
So it's got longer lasting effects than just in the day, which is quite worrying, isn't it, really? The amount of time that we're all spending with our iPads and phones right now. And the screens are getting bigger on those damn phones, which doesn't help, does it?
No, it doesn't.
So have you got any other tips to share with people? I mean, to help them get better sleep. I mean, you've talked about creating this kind of space and almost like a ritual, I guess, some of the foods you've talked about. Is there anything else you'd like to add to that?
I would say that if you are somebody who likes tea, that is a really easy ritual to bring in to, every evening. Maybe you're going to switch from your hot chocolate to a tea, decaf, of course. But that warm, cozy, let me get into bed now with my cup of tea and something to read, and I'm caved down. And that really sends that message to your subconscious mind that we're getting cozy and it's time to relax and unwind. If you are somebody who doesn't like tea, lighting a candle, make sure you blow it out before you go to sleep, but lighting a candle, just having that one little bedside light on, make sure that it's the warm light instead of the daylight balanced. And I would play with the bulb strength to see the least amount of light possible that you can comfortably read by.
So in terms of teas, because I've got quite a range of herbal teas at home, are there any that I should be avoiding? Or are there any that I really should be sort of introducing if sleep is the issue?
Well, chamomile has always historically been the sleepy tea.
And what if you don't like chamomile?
Then I would say go with whatever feels good for you.
So there aren't any that are kind of stimulating in that sense in the herbal teas?
Oh, there may be, but you've got to find out what, one person might find cinnamon stimulating and somebody else might find that to be very relaxing.
Okay.
Our biochemistry is also different. A kid who has ADHD, typically if you give them caffeine, that calms them down.
Okay.
So there is no catch-all. That really takes a little bit of experimenting. Okay. And if you don't like tea, the candle is always a possibility. Some really mellow music, anything to say to your subconscious mind, we're transitioning now into sleepy time.
And it's incredible because I create a sleep ritual for my little newborn, which is not newborn now, she's 4 months. And so there's very much there's the bath time with the little bubbles and then,
exactly.
And then we do the sleep and then I put the light onto the nice warm light and, she has this beautiful sleep ritual. And then when I go to bed, none of that happens. I just jump into bed and it all goes out the window. I'm trying to be really quiet not to wake her up for a start because she's still in with us at the moment. But yeah, we abandoned this idea of having these sleep rituals when we grow up and be adults, and actually they're really important.
They are extremely important. You already know the answer. You've already said it in what you laid out that you're doing for her. You just need to do it for yourself.
Yeah. And I think one thing that I use quite a lot and is the technique that my listeners are familiar with, which is the head trash clearance technique. My favourite time to use that is just before going to bed. And I often, and it really, because it just takes away all that, it calms your body right down. And sometimes, because I've cleared so much negative energy out of my body is so tired because I'm in healing mode. And when you're in healing mode, your body wants to sleep. And so
Absolutely.
I found that if you do some healing on yourself or whatever your practice is, that can be a really good time to do that, which is last thing at night. Get yourself into a nice, calm, happy place which can help you get to sleep, hopefully.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. The only issue that I see with that when people are just starting learning how to heal themselves, that's probably a difficult time, because then they have the whole, am I doing this right? This isn't going to work for me. And then they get that barrage of head trash.
yeah. Bringing it all to the surface, which might be the best thing. Absolutely. I've certainly been clearing my stuff for years because I've got quite a lot to clear, so that's why I've been doing it for so long. Okay, well, thank you so much, Chel, for joining me today and talking about sleep. It's been brilliant, and I'm going to include a lot of you just shared with us so many resources, tips, all that kind of stuff, so you'll let me have some links, and I'm going to put all those on the blog post for this episode. So if you want to find out about the research that Chel has just shared, your book, which is amazing. I've read it. It's got the cancel technique, which has helped you deal with your phobia of sharks. So it really does work really quickly.
Oh, yeah. And way more than that. I mean, that was like the long term. In the short term, it stopped panic attacks. Boom. Done.
Yeah. Brilliant. So, I mean, really simple, quick to use, which is what we like here at the Head Trash Show. Something that's really quick and simple to use. It's going to work. No point trying doing all this stuff with your life if it doesn't damn work, right? So
yes.
Brilliant. So thank you once again, Chel, for coming on the show. Now, before you go, where can we find you online if we want to find out more about your work? Where can we find out more about you?
The easiest place to find me will always be chelhamilton.com. It's CHEL Hamilton.com. I do have other sites, other programs, like the podcast, but everything kind of links up there, although the podcast just launched 2 weeks ago, so it's not on there yet. I should probably take care of that this week. I'm also on iTunes at Meditation Minis.
Perfect. And I'll include all that in the show notes for today's show. So once again, thank you so much for joining me on the show today. Super appreciated.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for tuning in. You've just been listening to Alexia Leachman here on The Head Trash Show. If you enjoyed the show, she'd really appreciate you leaving a review on iTunes. And don't forget to pop over to www.headtrash.co.uk to get your copy of the free 5 Steps to Clearing Head Trash guide. Stay tuned for upcoming episodes for more strategies, tips and how-tos for clearing your head trash and reclaiming your headspace. Until next time.